Hey everybody, so if you're watching this, we have another virtual lab, and I'm going to go ahead and go into the pathologies, the physiology, and anatomy of the bone tissue and the skeletal system to make it a little bit easier for you guys to do your virtual lab. So this is my office hours, Tuesday 4 to 5 p.m., email, office phone, that's how you can get a hold of me. Let's just get this started. So, okay, why it matters. The pathology for osteoporosis, for example, that is a disease in which the overall bone structure, whether it's its length, mass, or density, decreases. And yes, that has to attribute to aging, but the demographics for the most part are elder population. And specifically women. Women are predisposed to it. And that has to do to a number of varying factors. One of them is their hormones. So when we go through menopause as women, our estrogen levels decrease with age, and therefore that affects our calcium levels and can affect osteoporosis, increase the risk of osteoporosis. Here's an image of that right here. Menopause for osteoporosis, you see the woman as she's aging, that hunch is the osteoporotic bone tissue in her vertebral column. Another thing is recent studies on medications such as birth control, like the birth control pill, can actually affect overall bone density. There are recent clinical trials about this showing how bone density does decrease with consuming a lot of birth control pills. And so when you're doing that routinely, that's why we recommend you take a multivitamin so that you don't have an overall low blood calcium level. Some risk factors you have are alcoholism and anorexia, of course, will aggravate the morbidity. And so, it's important to know what a normal histological scale of a bone, for example, this is the normal bone, spongy bone, so that when you see something that's abnormal, like all these extra lumen in space in this histology slide, that's an osteoporotic bone. So you want to know what the normal looks like so you know what the abnormal is and can differentiate between that and give a proper pathology, okay, for your patients. So we're going to get into the 5 classes of bone. There is your long bones, which are right here, your long bone right here. Usually your femur, your tibia, your fibula, your humerus, your forearm, like those are your long bones. Your short bones, I recognize those as your cube shaped bones. So your short bones are right here, usually in your wrist or your ankle. Then you've got your flat bones, which are on your skull, the bones that make up your skull, your scapula, your shoulder blades, your rib cage, and your pelvis. Those are your flat bones. Don't let flat confuse you because some of them, like the scapula, definitely looks flat. Your rib cage is technically curved, but the bone itself is flat. That's what we say as a flat bone. Then you have your irregular bones that just want to be weird and have their own kind of category. So your vertebral column, as well as your facial bones, which is your maxilla and mandible. Those are your irregular bones. And then you have your sesamoid, that literally means sesame. It comes from the root word sesame seed. So that's how I remember it, like a sesame seed. And my camera is blocking it, but I circled up like your patella. So your kneecap, that is a sesamoid bone. Fun fact. So yeah, those are your 5 classes of bones that you need to know. So for long bone growth anatomy, you have, this is the entire bone. So let's say this is your femur. You've got the epiphysis, metaphysis, diaphysis, and those are your breakdowns. And then, of course, you got the proximal and distal metaphysis and proximal distal epiphysis. The biggest thing right here, you see the epiphyseal line right here. That's where growth occurs when it's an epiphyseal plate. And then some other distinctions you need to know. The yellow marrow is in your diaphysis, specifically in that medullary cavity. And the yellow bone marrow has fat. It's basically fat, lipids and stuff. And then your red marrow has red blood cell production, hematopoietic stem cells. This, for adult bones, you can tell if it's an adult or a pediatric patient because their femur, like this epiphyseal line, would be an epiphyseal plate for peds. So for adults, because you're done growing, that plate kind of calcifies and becomes an epiphyseal line. It's an epiphyseal plate while you're a child because as you're growing, getting taller and stuff, that bone is stretching and undergoes that type of endochondral ossification, which we're going to get into. But that's kind of the nitty gritty for this anatomy, okay? Then you also have compact for spongy bone. Again, my camera's covering it, sorry guys, but you can see the little kind of spongy like structures right there. And this is the compact bone right here. Biggest distinctions, your compact bone has osteons, and you've got your lamellae your Haversian system, which is your Volkmann's canal or Haversian canal. You've got your lacunae and caniculi that kind of surround, and that's pretty much your osteon. This whole cell is an osteon. Then for spongy bone, you have trabeculae. And in spongy bone, which is that top, remember with the epiphysis and metaphysis, that has your red marrow. So, and it has your hematopoietic stem cells. And hematopoietic stem cells are used for red blood cell production. So, fun fact, whenever we're doing, if you've ever heard of like cancer therapy with stem cell therapy that we get from your bone marrow, that's actually your red marrow that's in your spongy bone with the hematopoietic stem cells. And that makes sense because it aids in red blood cell production. So you've got your red blood cells, your white blood cells, your platelets. That's in those hematopoietic stem cells. And then again, this is just a diagram from your lab manual. This is the osteons, this compact bone. You can see all the different blood, the vasculature, the lamellae. This is the, canal, your centric canal or Volkmann's canal. Again, you'll notice with anatomy, anything with like a lumen, which is a space, lamellae, like those kind of spaces, sinusoids, those usually let fluid pass through, whether it's your vasculature, like your blood, nerves, and vessels, for your bone, or in any other organ, if there's a hole, is like blood or fluid or something like that. So if you see holes, know there's a purpose for it. It allows the transportation of fluid. And then also spongy bone is also cancellous bone. But you see that, again, red marrow located there. Okay, bone development. You got two different types of bone development. You've got endochondral ossification, and then you have intramembranous ossification. Your endochondral ossification is for your long bones, and that helps with bone lengthening. And then your flat bones undergo intramembranous ossification for that calcification matrix. So best way to describe this, so let's do long bones first. For endochondral ossification, you use your mesenchymal. Remember I went over for tissues mesenchymal stem cells as one of your connective tissue types. These mesenchymal cells will differentiate and specialize to become chondroblasts. Those chondroblasts will make hyaline cartilage. So when you're a child and we've got the femur, right? And that epiphyseal plate is a lot of cartilage. And that cartilage over time will grow and then be replaced with bone. And that's that process of endochondral ossification. And this happens at the epiphyseal plate or your growth plate. And the epiphyseal side is where the cartilage is formed. The diaphyseal side is where the cartilage is ossified. Or when I say ossified, it's hardened to become bone. Because when it's cartilage, it's really fluid and stuff. You want it to be hard bone, so it's a structure. And that's how the bone grows and lengthens. So fun fact, whenever, like, let's say you've broken a leg. I know somebody in our class has broken a leg before, and your doctor, your pediatrician worries about your growth plate being impacted. So depending on where the break is, like if we have a break on your epiphyseal plate, that could affect bone growth. That's why you don't want to like break your legs or anything, or like if you have a femur break, they're worried about that. They want that to heal properly so you don't have like an abnormal growth in one leg. So you're not like, I guess, hunched over for the most part of your life, or so that you're growing properly. You want to make sure you're growing effectively and get your optimum height. And part of that is you don't want to have a break in your femur, especially in the growth plate. So that's how you can remember endochondral ossification is on the epiphyseal plate, your growth plate for your long bones. It's bone lengthening, okay? And then, of course, when you become an adult and you're fully grown, your epiphyseal plate becomes a line. And then, fun fact, another thing which recent studies attribute to possible osteoporosis, another reason women are probably predisposed to it, is we stop growing sooner than males. So if you notice during puberty, like women were tall for a certain amount of time, you're taller than the guys or about the same height. And then around like in your teens, you stop growing, and then guys just shoot up and keep growing because they're still like undergoing that endochondral ossification on their femur bones, on their long bones, whereas we're pretty much set. And so once our bones are set, epiphyseal line forms, and you can actually start cellular aging accrues, and so that can aid to it too, theorized. Now for your flat bones, think of your skull, that's intramembranous ossification. So that's when your mesenchymal cells become osteoblasts and then form that ossification center and like a calcification of the matrix, like you calcified matrix. And that makes sense because you've got your skull bones, really those fissures form and make an actual hard skull. Because when you're a baby, it's just a fontanelle and loose fissures, and then they come together and calcify. So that's a way to kind of know the difference between the two. Flat bones, intramembranous ossification. Long bones, endochondral ossification. All right, 4 zones of bone growth. this is going under endochondral ossification. So pretend this is your entire growth plate right here, the growth plate zones, which is your epiphyseal plate for a pediatric patient, right? You've got your reserve zone where the chondrocytes are located, and then your proliferative zone. Anything proliferation for anatomy and for human biology has to deal with proliferation, means to create more. So the proliferative zone makes more chondrocytes through mitosis, through cellular division. So you're starting to make more of those, and then through maturation and hypertrophy, they become those increased amount of chondrocytes become larger and start to mature into fully adult cells, adult chondrocytes. And then they enter the calcified matrix, where they become, instead of active cells, they start to become bone. So they go from that cartilage to now they're solidified bone. And they say cell death right there because basically they become dead calcified cells. And then that's how you've got this bone layer. And then, of course, your metaphysis right here, your zone of ossification. But this is the entire process at that epiphyseal plate causing that bone lengthening. It starts at the reserve zone, which has your chondrocytes. Proliferative zone, you're making more chondrocytes. Maturation zone, they become more mature adult cells and get larger, so they get ready to be calcified bone. That's the steps in order at that epiphyseal growth plate. And then after a certain time, certain age, you become as tall as you're going to get, like me, unfortunately 5'4", and then that growth plate fuses and makes an epiphyseal line. These are your learning objectives. By the end of this lab, again, you're going to be able to know the different bone distinctions. So for the lab exercise, you're going to go under lab exercise, chapter 6, bone tissue and skeletal system. And you're going to actually click on this virtual lab. It's going to take you to it. You're going to use your lab manual as well as the lab overview slides that I posted, and kind of work through the problems. You're going to label your proper 5 classes of bones, the zones of growth, all of that we just went over today. And that is going to be your lab. I hope this was helpful in some way, and I will see you next week. Great. And I thought this was funny, guys. What do skeletons order at restaurants? Spare ribs. Why is anatomy so hard? Because the professor is really sternum. I'm not really that stern. And then I also found these humorous. Okay, now I'll go. Have a great day, guys.